Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 775B, and today's date is September 25th, 2015, and the title of this episode is Putin Pushes for Peace in Syria at the Same Time Obama Pushes for War. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. The interview with Stephen Lenman is now on the X22 Report Spotlight channel. You can go right over to YouTube, type in X22 Report Spotlight, bring you right to the video, or you can come over to the X22Report.com site. Scroll down a little bit, you'll see it on the right-hand side, and you can play it right from there. Let's get right into the economic collapse geopolitical news. Now, the U.S. government, they will never stop trying to spy on each and every one of us. And we know they use the spying for many different agendas. They use it to blackmail judges. They use it to blackmail government employees. They use it to keep track of certain people or certain groups. They use it to spy on other people in different nations, even our allies. And the government, no matter what they say, and I know Obama says we're going to do an complete overhaul of the NSA, which they never did. They said they're going to discontinue the Patriot Act, but they just created the USA Freedom Act, which allows the corporations to spy on every single person. So they really didn't stop anything. Actually, they made it easier for themselves because they shifted the responsibility over to the corporations. And all they're waiting for is CISPA or CISA to be passed so they can collect that information and not have these corporations be liable for it. And this is what they've been trying to push through, but it has been shut down every single time. But there was a leaked memo that shows the White House explored all different ways for law enforcement to unlock encrypted smartphones. Here's some of the ideas that they wanted to use. They wanted to separate encryption keys or spyware embedded in automatic software updates. They wanted the providers to add a separate encrypted port to their devices through which any law enforcement could access the data after receiving a warrant by using a set of keys that only they would have. But when they do this, it's a hole in security and other hackers can have access to it. Another approach was to add spyware to automatic software updates. And this is something that hackers use today. But they wanted to use it where you got a software update and it allowed them to have access to your phone. Another method was splitting up encryption keys that could be combined under court order. A fourth solution involved a forced backup where they would just take all the information from your phone and store it on an unencrypted location. And technologists have warned that this is absolutely ridiculous. They're removing the security and allowing others to find the holes and to break in. And we've seen this happen before. And this is why we all need to take responsibility to make sure and make it harder for the government to spy on us. I mean, on the X22Report.com site, on the right-hand side, scroll down, someone introduced me into PyCrypt. He created it, and I put the link there. It's open source where you can encrypt messages. You can take a look at that. Go over to it. You can take a look at it, see what it's like. You can use Start Page. This will hide your searches. Someone mentioned a Tor browser, which will keep you completely anonymous. For your credit card, for your driver's license, you can use a product called Pocket at blocketpocket.com, and they're just sleeves and they're interwoven with metals like silver, copper, and it blocks the signal. So if you have a credit card with an RFID chip, you slip it into there, close it, and it will block the signal. So if someone's walking by with a scanner, they can't lift your information. The same thing with the real IDs that are going to replace the driver's license. The new ones are going to have these chips in them, and it will block the signal. You can use them for your phone. You can use them for your iPad, and it will cut off the signal so you cannot be tracked. So there are all different ways that you can protect yourself And I know with Smart Page, if you decide to use one of the proxies there to completely hide your location, sometimes the websites don't come up that great. Some of the functionality does not work. But if you don't use that function, at least Google doesn't connect your searches with you. Now, DHS, we know they've been working on this kill switch to kill cell phones if something happens, like a false flag. And in the Boston bombing and many different incidences, what they did was they shut down these cell towers to stop people from calling out and sending pictures. But what they didn't realize was once the towers came back up, people started sending pictures all over the place. And this posed a problem. And this is why they are looking to put, and most likely everyone has, the kill switch on their phone. So if something happens in an area, your phone will just die. Now what are they working on? Well, the Department of Homeland Security has revealed that it's working with Boeing Company to develop a so-called brain chip that would allow any smartphone to self-destruct. Now, in theory, this technology will provide users with additional intelligent security so that in an event a smartphone is stolen or lost, the device will basically just self-destruct. And how does it know, if it was stolen or anything like that? Well, the chip will detect unusual activity by accessing your camera, your microphone, because it's going to track the way you talk, the way you walk, your behavior as you use your phone. So do you really think this is all for the self-destruct, or are they trying to correlate this in a database somewhere to match you up with people who are using cell phones? Because it seems to me that that would be a great way to track each individual, because each individual, their movement, the way they talk on the phone, the way they use it, is completely different. And they're saying, oh, no, we're going to use this for, high-level government employees just in case the phone gets stolen. But it seems to me that they're going to be using this for something else down the line. And they always give the story that, oh, no, we're going to use it for this. But it seems like this is just another way of tracking each person. So they're going to access your camera, your microphone, and your touchpad on your phone and record all this information. Very interesting. And if you notice, the White House is continually trying to figure out ways on how to get through the encryption of your phone. And if you notice from the leaked memo, they're never going to stop. They're never going to say, oh, no, we decided not to do this. No. They're always doing this. They're just finding different ways to do it. Now, this Sunday, we're going to have to watch Spain and Catalonia. There's going to be a referendum. And a lot of people saying, well, could this kick off a black swan type of scenario? And we know that the Bank of Spain brought in all these vans. They didn't want to comment on what they were doing there. They pulled up. Something was loaded into them, most likely gold, and then they were driven away. And we can see right now that on September 27th, the election in Catalonia, which really accounts for 19% of Spanish GDP, is going to be voted on. And if they decide that, they want to be separate and apart, this could really muddy the waters further ahead of general elections in December, creating further uncertainty and adding yet another destabilizing element to an already fragile situation in the EU. I mean, think about what we have here. France, Italy, Spain, Greece, Cyprus, Portugal, all teetering on disaster. And if Catalonia breaks apart from Spain, this could have a disastrous effect across Europe, because other countries are going to say, whoa, wait a minute. They've just done this, so can we. And this could be a huge problem. Now, we're getting additional warnings out of Malaysia. I mentioned that the U.S. gave a warning to the people in Malaysia, U.S. citizens, to be very wary that there could be a potential terrorist attack. Now, Australia is giving the same warning to their embassies in Malaysia. So we're having warnings in Malaysia, warnings in Chad, warnings in South Africa, warnings in Libya. Do you think something's about to happen? It's starting to look that way. Now, out in Afghanistan, we've mentioned so many times before that U.S. troops, even though Obama told us, and we always know it's the opposite, that they were going to remove the troops from Afghanistan. There's no reason to have them anymore in Afghanistan. But what we're seeing right now is they're using the Islamic State, and they're saying that, troops might need to stay in Afghanistan beyond 2016. Army General John Campbell, the top U.S. commander in Afghanistan, has submitted 5 different recommendations for Allied troop levels to the Pentagon and NATO officials in Brussels to keep the troops inside Afghanistan. We're never leaving Afghanistan. It is rich with copper, lithium. There's a pipeline that runs right through Afghanistan. There's the poppy fields that they use to pay for their covert operations, which they sell opium across the world. And it's in a strategic location. And we know that Russia and China are making economic deals with Afghanistan. They're never going to leave this area. We see in Ukraine, Standard & Poor's has now cut their rating to selective default. The cut in its credit rating comes after Ukraine started restructuring debts and suspended payments on a number of liabilities that will be restructured. And the main reason for the downgrade was that on September 23rd, the country failed to make a $500 million repayment. They don't have the money. Remember, the United States government central bankers came into this country, destroyed the economy, destroyed the currency, put the country so far into debt, stole their gold, and now each part of the country is breaking off from Ukraine. Sounds fantastic. What a great job. And if you look at Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Lebanon, and many other countries, you see the same exact scenario. Now, Ukraine is taking this to the next level. They have banned Aeroflot and Transaero, and they will not be allowed to fly over Ukraine if they're carrying any type of military equipment or soldiers. So if they're flying over Ukraine heading towards another country, they cannot use Ukrainian airspace. And this is coming from Yatsenyuk. And we know he has been placed in Ukraine because he is a central banker, and he was one of the people that was already pre-selected to be one of the rulers inside of Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is considering additional sanctions against Russian companies. What's the reason for this? They're following the Minsk II? Well, we know they're not. But they're continually provoking Russia. They want Russia to do something, but Putin, he just doesn't come out and do what they want. He sits back and he watches and he observes. And he's doing this not just in Ukraine, but he's doing this in Syria. And every time they try to push, he comes out with a peace deal, a ceasefire deal. And now he wants to meet with Angela Merkel. He wants to meet with French President Hollande. And they're going to be talking about Ukraine on October 2nd. Now, we know that France might be selling the Mistral ships to Egypt. And what's very interesting about this is that Egypt and Russia have very close ties. And they're doing a lot of economic and a lot of military contract deals. And I wouldn't be surprised if Egypt turns around and sells these ships to Russia. Wouldn't that be something? The U.S. put pressure on France not to sell the ships to Russia, so they sell them to Egypt. Egypt then turns around and sells them to Russia. It looks like this might happen. Now, it looks like, and as we know, The U.S. is preparing to go to war with Russia. They're dusting off their war plans. They're using all different types of scenarios, and we're starting to see that there is no winning scenario for the United States. But the U.S. is preparing for a possible conflict with Russia in the Baltic states. The Pentagon has worked out various plans and performed numerous war games in order to be able to respond to Russian aggression. And they're saying that this new U.S. defense plan is focused on a so-called hybrid warfare. It uses irregular troops, targeted destabilization of the region by organizing mass protests, and the use of cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. This is the new strategy for war. And the U.S. has already announced plans to deploy more tanks and artillery to the Baltic states. Now, a German lawmaker is out there saying that this provocation now with Russia has gone too far. NATO is now patrolling the skies over the Baltic countries with full ammunition loads to be ready for Russian aggression. And the German lawmaker Sarah Wagenknecht is saying this is pure madness. This one small mistake will kick off World War III. And yeah, that could happen. The Pentagon's most elite troops have been dispatched to nearly 70% of the world's countries in 2015. What are they doing? Well, the soldiers are practicing night raids. Some of them are real night raids. And they're actually gunning down enemies. The U.S. Special Operations soldiers are carrying out missions in up to 90 nations every day, coming from a new report from SOCOM. And they wouldn't name all the countries. They're saying, no, we can't give you the names out. But they're saying that the number of personnel doubled. They used to have about 33,000 special forces in 2001, spread out. Now it's 70,000. Right now, 15% of U.S. Marines are now deployed to Hawaii, Guam, and elsewhere in the Pacific as part of Washington's pivot to Asia. Lieutenant General John Tulin, the head of Marine Corps Forces Pacific, said his Marines are postured to ensure rapid response throughout the Asian Pacific across the range for military operations just in case something occurs in this region. Well, what can occur here? I mean, we're at peace. What nation are you talking about? They're talking about China. Full ready. So what's happening here is everything is pre-positioned and ready to go. Ready to go for World War III. Now, Obama and Putin, they're going to be meeting about the situation in Ukraine and about the situation in Syria. And they're going to be meeting at the UN General Assembly. And Obama is out there saying that, no, we're meeting about Ukraine. Putin's saying, no, this meeting's about Syria. It's not about Ukraine. And what we're finding out right now is that Putin understands what the U.S. is doing in Syria. He has the satellite images. He has the intel. He understands that ISIS is the proxy army. He realizes that this whole agenda is to take out Assad. And now he says, this has to stop. We're done right now. You can go no further. Right now, Russia is bringing in ships. They're saying this is part of a East Mediterranean drill. Some of the ships, and I'm going to try to pronounce them, are the Saratov landing ship, the Moskva guided missile cruiser, the Smetlivy destroyer. And they're saying the drills that they're going to hold are going to involve about 40 combat exercises, including rocket and artillery fire at sea and at airborne targets. And we know why these ships are there. He's flexing his muscles saying, listen, Obama, we know what you're up to. Don't go after Assad. This will not turn out well if you do this. Now, of course, the United States government central bankers, they can never admit that they were wrong. They can never admit that the Islamic State is their proxy army. Because if they do this, think of the ramifications. Now, let's say the United States says, okay, the Islamic State is really not a terrorist group. It's a proxy army for the United States. You know all those videos that we saw of the beheadings? That means the United States beheaded its own citizens on video and showed it to the world. How is the rest of the world going to look at the United States at this point? I mean, it would be a complete disaster. So when you think about these videos now, are they real or are they really fake? We know they're fake. But they can't admit to this because this whole thing would completely fall apart. And if you notice from their actions, and I say the U.S. government central bankers, they'll never admit it. They'll keep pushing to the very end. Yes, they might be sidelined a little bit, but they'll come up with a new plan and come back even stronger. Now, Russia has introduced a UN resolution saying that we should call the Islamic State a global terrorist group, which means that every single country can go after the Islamic State. The UN says yes. That means it's fair game. Guess who opposes this? The United States. Now, why would they do that? Unless it is the proxy army for them. And that's exactly what it is. Because their actions show you that the Islamic State is not a terrorist group. Al-Qaeda is not a terrorist group. All this security is a waste of time and money. It's to keep everyone in fear. That's it. Because now, reverse and go back. Well, if Al-Qaeda is a government entity, and the Islamic State is a government entity, there is no terrorism. There's no need for the pat-downs. There's no need for these security checks. There's no need for any of this. They can't admit this. This would be a complete disaster. So Putin is giving them a choice right now. What do you want to do? Because we will take out the Islamic State. We know where they are, and it will be very easy to do so. And we know that the United States is not going to sit back and say, go ahead and do this. Their plan might get sidelined. They might come back with something else, or they might move back to Ukraine and say, okay, let's try this plan. But these plans are going nowhere. They're in a lose-lose situation. And when a power such as the United States government central bankers are in a lose-lose situation, guess what they resort to? Something horrific. Something where they can point the finger and say, oh my God, look what just happened. And this is where we are headed at this point. They are backed into a corner. And they're going to push it hard. They're running out of time. I mean, the president of China, Xi Jinping, was here to talk about cyber attacks. The Chinese president thought he was coming over to sign something to say, okay, we agree we should not be doing cyber attacks. And of course, the president of China is saying, we didn't attack you. Please show us the evidence. Well, we have the IP address. Well, as everyone knows, the IP address is meaningless because you can bounce this off server to server to server. And you can mask it, and you can make it look like it's coming from China, or use a server in China for the attack. So that's kind of meaningless. But what happened was they didn't sign anything there. They came up with a mutual agreement, which is absolutely meaningless. And the reason why they didn't want to sign anything, because that would hold the U.S. government central bankers accountable. And they know they need to blame this on China, on North Korea, on Russia. And they're going to use a cyber attack when all else fails. And this is where we are headed. And this is why everyone needs to stay prepared and ready. You need to continually do this. Just because you see the stock market moving up a little bit, I mean, one day you see the stock market down and everyone gets worried. Next day you see it in the green, it's up, 100 points or so, and everyone goes, "Oh, it must be over." No, this is just the beginning. This is a blessing in disguise because it gives you this time. And for those people who've been preparing for quite a while, it gave you all that time. Because with a snap of a finger, it will all come to an end. And you'll be wishing that you did something. So continually get that food. Continually get the medical supplies. Get a weapon. Have cash. Get gold and silver. If you haven't started by now, please start. Do whatever you can. You can even go to lifereliance.com. They have bug out bags, water filtration system, food, all ready to go. And it's really not that expensive. If that's too much, go to Costco. Go to BJ's. Buy a little bit at a time right now. You have this small window. Do what you can. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.